From the moment you were told you were free, you felt the weight of that freedom press against your chest. Freedom was supposed to be the open sky, the boundless horizon, the endless road of possibility. Yet in practice it began to feel more like a tightening noose, a silent hand around the throat because every choice was no longer just a decision. It was a reflection of who you were, who you weren't, and who you might have been if you had chosen differently. You stand in front of infinite doors, but each one whispers of all the doors you will never open once you step through just one. And the irony is that this abundance, this dazzling display of options, makes you more anxious, not less, more restless, not more certain. You were given the gift of freedom, but it became a mirror that only reflects your doubt. You think freedom should release you, but it traps you in the corridors of your own mind. Every path calls itself the right one, yet none feels final, and so you hesitate, you second-guess, you replay the film of your life as if the frame could be edited backward. This is the first paradox. The more choices you are given, the less free you feel. The more the world opens, the more you collapse inside yourself. It is not the chains of limitation that weigh you down. It is the infinity of possibility. You look at the shelf lined with endless options, and instead of tasting abundance, you taste bitterness, because every yes contains 1,000 silent no's. But why does this happen? Why does the promise of choice breed paralysis? It is because freedom is not what you think it is. Freedom has been painted for you as possibility without consequence, but true freedom is inseparable from loss. Every decision is not only the creation of one path, but the destruction of all others. To choose is to kill the ghosts of the futures you will never live, and each time you decide, you are confronted with death. Not the death of the body, but the death of identities, of selves, of unlived worlds. No one told you that freedom is haunted. No one told you that choice is a funeral. You begin to sense that this endless freedom is not entirely natural, that perhaps the human mind was never built to carry infinite possibility. For most of history, your choices were few, your roles pre-written, your horizons marked by survival. And within that narrow frame you could breathe. But now, with everything open, with no boundaries to hold you, you drown in the sea of your own supposed liberty. It is not that freedom is a lie. It is that freedom unbound by meaning becomes its own cage. Too much light blinds, too much sky suffocates. And here you find the deeper fracture. You are told that more choice means more control, but the opposite occurs. You become enslaved by comparison, by the endless measuring of what you gained against what you lost. Even when you choose, you remain divided, one foot in the life you picked, the other still staring into the shadows of what might have been. Every decision is contaminated by regret, every freedom turned into self-judgment. And so the promise of liberation becomes the machinery of your torment. Yet you cannot escape choice. You cannot walk away from freedom. You cannot ask the world to shrink back into certainty, for that would be another choice, another paradox. You are left with the realization that freedom will not save you. Freedom will not soothe you. Freedom, as you have been sold it, will strip you bare until you see the truth behind its illusion. And perhaps, in that nakedness, a different kind of freedom waits, the kind not found in the infinite shelf of possibilities, but in the way you hold yourself when faced with them. The hunger for choice did not arise by accident. It was planted deep in the psyche, fed by centuries of longing, sharpened by revolt against every cage the human spirit once endured. To be human is to have once lived in chains, bound to bloodlines, gods, rulers, and rigid roles. The serf did not choose their trade, the soldier did not choose their war, the child did not choose their destiny. And so when modernity arrived with its promise of autonomy, it felt like a rupture in history, a divine breaking of shackles. The philosophers of freedom told you that self-determination was the highest good, that to choose was to be sovereign, that to decide was to be alive. Yet hidden beneath that triumph was a seed of unease, because the psyche, shaped over millennia to survive limitation, suddenly faced an unfamiliar horizon, infinity. Jung would remind you that the psyche carries the weight of archetypes, that the human being is not infinitely malleable, but structured by ancient forms. The ego can insist on endless possibility, but the unconscious still longs for order, still craves the symbolic scaffolding that makes existence intelligible. Nietzsche would laugh at the illusion that freedom means comfort, for he saw clearly that choice without strength collapses into despair. The will to power, he insisted, is not about options but about affirmation. The ability to choose not from fear of missing out, but from the fire of self-creation. And Schopenhauer, the great pessimist, would whisper that all your freedom is illusion anyway, because the will that drives you is older, darker, and indifferent to your conscious reasoning. You think you choose, but often you are only rationalizing the primal currents already moving beneath you. This is the origin of the paradox. Freedom was sold as an escape from suffering, but in truth it only rearranged the form of suffering. The external shackles were broken, but internal chains were forged, subtler and more insidious. You are no longer bound by kings, but you are bound by anxiety. You are no longer trapped in one destiny, but you are tormented by the weight of endless ones. What was once oppression became uncertainty, and uncertainty has a cruelty of its own. Choice at its root collides with the structure of desire. Desire is not rational. It is a flame that leaps without order, a hunger that does not ask permission. When you are given many choices, desire fragments. Part of you wants this, part of you wants that, and suddenly you are split across 1,000 selves. Every option is not just a path, it is a mirror of who you could be, and the more you look into those mirrors, the less you know the face staring back. Freedom reveals not your sovereignty, but your fragmentation. Society deepens this wound. In a culture saturated with images, comparisons, and constructed identities, every choice becomes a performance. You no longer choose quietly. You choose under the gaze of others, under the invisible weight of expectation, status, and judgment. Even solitude cannot protect you, because the internalized audience still watches, whispering that you could have been more, should have been more, might still be more, if only you had chosen differently. Freedom was supposed to liberate you from the eyes of authority, but instead it multiplied those eyes until you became your own tyrant. Sartre once declared that you are condemned to be free. It was not a celebration, but a diagnosis. Freedom is not a gift you can refuse, nor is it a burden you can escape. It is the ground of your existence, and with it comes anguish. For to choose is not simply to act. It is to take responsibility for being. And responsibility, when faced with infinite paths, can crush even the strongest spirit. To live authentically in freedom demands courage, but courage does not come naturally when the cost of error feels eternal. Here lies the deeper philosophical wound. You want freedom to mean safety, but true freedom means exposure. To be free is to stand without cover, to face the abyss of possibility without guarantee. And so the paradox deepens. The very thing that makes you human, the capacity to choose, becomes the thing that terrifies you most. You cannot return to innocence, to the days when choices were made for you, but you cannot easily embrace the vastness either. You are caught in between, torn between the comfort of chains and the terror of the horizon. This is why the paradox of choice persists, generation after generation. It is not simply about markets, decisions, or consumer psychology. It is about the architecture of the human soul colliding with the architecture of modern freedom. And unless you understand its roots, you will continue to mistake your paralysis for weakness, your regret for failure, when in truth it is the natural outcome of being human in an age that asks you to carry more freedom than your ancestors ever dreamed of. Choice does not merely live in the abstract. It cuts into the flesh of life itself. You wake each day surrounded by the endless chorus of options: what to eat, what to wear, who to become, where to aim your brief and burning attention. Each decision seems trivial in isolation, but together they weave a web that tightens around you. The more possibilities you entertain, the more fragile you feel, because each chosen path is haunted by the specter of what you abandoned. This is not just inconvenience, it is the erosion of your sense of self. For if you could be anything, then who are you really? The paradox takes form in paralysis. Faced with abundance, you hesitate. You scroll endlessly, compare tirelessly, delay decisions until the weight of inaction becomes heavier than the burden of choice itself. Life begins to stall, not because you lack opportunity, but because you are drowning in it. This is why entire generations find themselves locked in cycles of indecision, wandering through careers, relationships, and identities with a sense of tentative attachment, always keeping one eye open for the next possibility, never fully surrendering to the one at hand. The culture of options breeds a culture of half-lived lives, and when decisions are made, regret seeps in like water through cracked stone. You look backward and wonder if another path might have brought more joy, more recognition, more wholeness. Every success is tainted by the invisible shadow of the success you imagine you forfeited. Even happiness becomes suspicious, fragile, easily unraveled by comparison. The paradox ensures that contentment cannot last, because the imagination always insists another world might have been better. Freedom does not silence desire. It multiplies it into endless echoes, each one louder than the last. This distortion reaches into identity. You are told that choice is the way to discover who you are, yet each choice fragments rather than clarifies. When you change careers, you abandon not only a job but a self. When you leave a relationship, you leave behind a version of you that once existed only in that shared space. You carry these fragments like ghosts, each one whispering what you could have been. And so the modern self is not whole. It is a shattered mirror reflecting thousands of possible identities, none of which feel fully real. Freedom was supposed to give you authenticity, yet it often leaves you with the suspicion that you are playing roles, shifting masks, curating selves that can never quite solidify. The consequence is exhaustion, decision fatigue, anxiety, an endless hunger that devours clarity. You live in a society that praises autonomy, yet punishes you with its weight. You are told you can design your life like a product, but products do not breathe, and you cannot engineer away the chaos of being human. In chasing the perfect choice, you neglect the present one, and in searching for certainty, you destroy the fragile beauty of uncertainty. This pattern infects not only individuals but cultures. Collectives obsessed with freedom fragment into tribes, each choice of value or belief creating new divisions. Societies of endless options breed shallow commitments, temporary loyalties, fragile bonds. Even nations crumble under the pressure of limitless preference because cohesion requires shared limitation. What you see on the personal scale, paralysis, regret, fragmentation, you also see on the societal scale. Freedom becomes disintegration. And beneath it all lies fear, the fear of being wrong, the fear of missing out on the life that could have been yours, the fear that your choice reveals your inadequacy. You may call it anxiety, but it is something older, something primal. For every decision is a brush with mortality, a reminder that time is finite, and each path chosen kills another forever. You do not fear choice itself. You fear the graveyard of possibilities it leaves behind. Here the paradox reveals its cruelty in full. You long for freedom, yet freedom ensures you will never feel complete. You strive to choose, yet every choice slices your soul into fragments of what could have been. You are trapped, not by others, but by the architecture of possibility itself. And in that trap you begin to see how deeply freedom and suffering are intertwined. To live inside the paradox of choice without being devoured by it demands a shift that is neither easy nor comforting. It begins by abandoning the fantasy that one path will save you, that there exists a perfect decision capable of erasing all doubt and silencing all regret. That fantasy is the true prison, for it keeps you searching in circles, chasing the illusion of certainty in a world that was never designed to provide it. Real freedom does not come from choosing correctly. It comes from embracing the imperfection of every choice you make and the inevitability of loss each choice entails. When you begin to see that every decision is both creation and destruction, you stop expecting freedom to be weightless. You start to recognize that the burden of choice is not a flaw, but a feature of being alive. Instead of demanding clarity before you act, you allow yourself to step forward, knowing you will leave worlds behind. This shift does not erase regret. It teaches you to carry regret differently, as a reminder of your depth rather than a condemnation of your inadequacy. The ghosts of unlived lives will always follow you, but you can learn to walk with them rather than being haunted by them. Practically, this means learning to limit yourself deliberately, not because limitation is a failure of freedom, but because limitation is the only way freedom takes form. A river without banks is not free, it is a flood. In the same way, a life without chosen boundaries is not liberation but chaos. To commit to one path fully, even temporarily, is to carve meaning out of infinite possibility. The commitment itself becomes an act of defiance against the paralysis of abundance. It is not about finding the perfect option. It is about pouring yourself into the option you choose until it becomes more than it was when you first found it. The paradox also demands a new relationship with regret. Instead of treating regret as proof that you chose wrong, you can treat it as proof that you are alive, that you still imagine, still long, still carry within you more potential than one life can contain. Regret is not evidence of failure. It is evidence of richness, of the fact that you are always more than the choices available to you. To feel the pull of unlived lives is not weakness. It is the mark of a spirit too vast to be reduced to one identity. At the collective level, integration requires recognizing that abundance without orientation corrodes cohesion. Communities, nations, even civilizations must learn to choose not endlessly but wisely, to anchor themselves in values that give boundaries to freedom. The future does not belong to societies that offer the most options, but to those that can shape those options into coherent forms of life. Too much fragmentation destroys trust, while chosen commitments sustain it. Just as the individual must limit to live fully, the collective must anchor itself to endure. And so the real task is not to escape the paradox but to live inside it with clarity. To understand that choice will always wound you, but that the wound itself can be sacred. To see that freedom will always trap you, but that the trap is also the stage where you sculpt who you are. You cannot resolve the tension between freedom and loss, but you can transform the way you bear it. Instead of expecting freedom to deliver certainty, you can allow it to demand courage. Instead of searching for perfect lives, you can live one imperfect life with depth. The world will keep multiplying options. The shelves will keep expanding. The screens will keep flashing. The illusions will keep inviting you into comparison. But beneath it all, the structure of existence remains the same. To live is to choose, and to choose is to lose, and to lose is to grow. The trap of freedom becomes its own liberation when you stop fleeing from its weight and start carrying it as the price of becoming whole. Freedom was never meant to be clean. It was never meant to be soft, easy, or endlessly reassuring. Freedom was meant to confront you with the raw material of existence, to hand you a chisel and point to the block of stone that is your life, daring you to carve knowing each strike destroys as much as it reveals. The paradox of choice is not an error in the system. It is the system. It is the proof that you are alive in a world that offers more than you can ever hold, and that every act of choosing is an act of defining who you are in the face of infinity. The trap you feel, the paralysis, the regret, the endless scanning of possibilities is not a sign of weakness. It is the shadow cast by a deeper truth, that you were never designed to live all lives. You were designed to live this one. And to live this one fully requires abandoning the fantasy that there is something out there that will complete you. There is no perfect choice. There is only the choice you make and the way you inhabit it. The pain of what you leave behind is the price of depth, and the weight you carry is the shape of meaning itself. In the end, freedom does not demand that you be flawless. It demands that you be present, that you stop running from the burden of possibility and instead hold it, steady and unflinching. To live with freedom is to know you will always betray other paths, always abandon other selves, always walk away from worlds that could have been yours. And yet you walk anyway. You breathe anyway. You choose anyway. Because life is not about escaping the wound of freedom. It is about allowing the wound to make you real. So the paradox remains. Freedom traps you. But in that trap lies the only chance you have at becoming yourself. The walls are not made to contain you. They are made to sharpen you. Every choice cuts, every decision bleeds. But in that blood is the ink with which your story is written. You can keep searching for a door that erases the paradox, or you can step through one door, fully aware of the others fading behind you, and know that this is what it means to live. No advice will save you. No philosophy will erase the abyss. But perhaps truth itself can soften the panic. You were not meant to live unscathed. You were meant to live torn, fractured, incomplete, yet alive within those fractures. Freedom will always feel like both liberation and prison. That is its essence. And when you finally stop demanding that it be otherwise, you will discover that even within the trap, you are free. This is the return. The realization that freedom is not what you imagined, but it is still yours. You cannot master it. You cannot escape it. You can only live it, fully, imperfectly, courageously, until the day comes when no more choices remain. And perhaps then you will see that the trap was never a trap at all, but the very shape of your becoming.